Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the NAB Creative Master Series. I'm Paul Rodriguez with the MPSE. I'd like to thank the NAB, our friends at ILM, and Skywalker Sound for making all this possible. I welcome you to check out the motion picture sound editors. I'll be around here later on if you want more information. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to Brian Bishop, who's our moderator today from The Verge. Brian?
Thanks, Paul. First of all, thanks to everybody for coming to come to our discussion of this very tiny, small, independent film called Star Wars: The Force Awakens. And it's my pleasure to be up here with some of the most incredibly talented people in their fields. Visual effects supervisor Pat Tubach, supervising sound editor Matthew Wood, and visual effects art director James Klein. And these guys put together a lot of amazing things for you to see and hear tonight. But unfortunately, we can't record or take photos of any of those, so I'm the bad guy. But before we start with that, I want to ask these guys a question, because every time I talk to somebody at ILM or Skywalker Sound, it inevitably comes up that Star Wars was some sort of seminal formative moment for them that set them on the path to working into their field. So I'm just wondering for you guys, was that true for you three as well? And what was it like when you first found out that you're going to be working on Episode 7?
Well, for me, Star Wars was definitely one of those highly influential movies that, as a kid, I think Return of the Jedi was the one that hit me in the sweet spot for, I think at least 2 birthday parties went to see the movie, So, it had a huge effect on me. And then when I found out that I was going to have the opportunity to work at ILM, I remember just, running to the phone and calling my mother, of course. It's the first person you call. And I said, and I could end up working on a Star Wars movie. It was still like pie in the sky, I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm going to go to ILM. I hope it happens. And I got to work on Episode 2 and Episode 3 as well. So it's huge, and it's been a huge part of my career. And I honestly never thought Episode 7 would really happen. It just was one of those things that, George didn't seem to have an interest in doing it, and I didn't think it was going to happen. And so when I found out that it was happening and that I was going to be able to be on it, it was, again, that same mind-blowing thing. I probably called my wife this time, but...
Probably a good call. It's a good call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, same thing for me. I was a young kid when the first ones came out as well, and I remember the first time I even knew the filmmaking process and what it even was because of Star Wars. I had the oversized Marvel comic book. It was the whole Star Wars thing in comic book form. And the very last page, it had a picture of Alec Guinness in his full Obi-Wan garb. But then there was this other guy sitting next to him in a chair, this scruffy guy with a plaid shirt and a big coat on. And I was like, who is that, Mom? I don't know. I saw the whole movie and that guy's not in it. Who said it? Well, that's the director. He made the movie. That's George Lucas. And what, the actors don't just make the movie in front of the camera? So that for me was the big, there's people that make these movies, and then I really got interested in how they make the movies and what are they doing. And to get an opportunity to work on it again, that's funny. I called my mom as well, right when that.
Shame.
Yeah, no shame. And same thing, Episode 7 seemed like something that was just going to be a fan want that was going to be out there. And I worked on all the prequels, and so coming into 7, 10 years later after a Sith was a real dream come true. And to see the passion behind it with new filmmakers with their own take on the universe was a great thing to be a part of.
I think for myself, it was a similar thing. Maybe it's because we're around the same age, but yeah. I was 8 during Empire Strikes Back, and I remember I found this book in the bookstore. It was a sketchbook of Empire Strikes Back, and it was all just black and white, just little sketches, and I had no idea what the process of filmmaking was, but this book somehow gave me a little light into what art direction and art is, that there's actually artists behind filmmaking. Yeah. And I still have that book. I have all these really horrible, crappy drawings in it that I've drawn over all the beautiful artwork. I still have that book. It's all dog-eared, but very seminal kind of influence on definitely all of us.
Yeah. Well, it definitely seems the work that you've done this time is kind of inspiring a new generation of people. So, congrats on that.
Oh, thank you.
And obviously, Star Wars, ILM are inextricably linked. So, Pat, I was wondering if you could talk about, the workflow and all that kind of stuff that went into when you started the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Star Wars and ILM. In fact, actually, I have a clip that probably illustrates that really well, and we can show that. But basically, sort of the art department or the art of Star Wars. Ralph McQuarrie in the original, with those original designs of those characters and those ships and those buildings, that whole aesthetic, and he created sort of this imaginative world that George Lucas sort of paired with his innovative filmmaking style. His desire to create a movie that nobody's ever seen before. And in order to do that, you have to have images that nobody's ever seen before. You have to have something inspirational to get people into this universe that you're creating. And I think that it was sort of a perfect marriage of that. Not only that, but he found a bunch of people that were as interested in making films as he was, basically. Right. And he needed a crew of people who were willing to go that extra mile and take it to a place where it was outside of the traditional Hollywood boundaries. They were doing things that people had never done or wouldn't let them do. If they knew what they were doing, they probably would have said, shut this down right now. Yeah. But they ended up making this amazing piece of art and technology, that is Star Wars. And those two things are very much linked, and ILM and art are very much linked. So anyway, yeah, I have a redundant slide to talk about who we all are, and then some basic facts about the film, which was that it was about 2,100 visual effects shots and a couple of years of visual effects involvement in the filmmaking process. A lot of people tend to think of visual effects as a post-production process, but in fact, in sound in the same way, that you start very early on working with the filmmaker to develop sort of some of these ideas that are eventually going to be executed in post, but you have to get in very early and talk about what you're going to do. There were about 8 visual effects facilities involved. We have ILM Singapore, London, San Francisco, of course, Vancouver. And then we have a partner company, Base Effects in China, that we worked with, and Hybrid in Montreal, and a company in Vietnam, Virtuous, who did some assets for us. So it was very much a worldwide kind of, as visual effects films tend to be these days. But of course, having ILM sort of at the helm and having so much ILM involvement really meant that we had a lot of control over this particular project. And of course, there are hundreds of visual effects artists and even hundreds more of production people and support staff and everyone that makes this stuff happen. And I'm sure the sound department is quite large for a film like this as well.
Yeah, I mean, we started the same thing. It was a couple of years earlier. A couple of years before we finished, and JJ brought us all and pitched the movie to us at Pinewood, myself and the 2 sound designers. And started working, I mean, even at the script inception, just to get ideas about what to go out and record. And it was very similar to the way that Ben Burtt and George Lucas worked together on the original Star Wars. Ben Burtt's the original sound designer of a lot of the iconic sounds of Star Wars. And his idea was that we start when the script is ready. We can go out and into the field, record as much material as we can to bring back to the studio to give us inspiration for what's coming ahead. And so it was very inclusive from the J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot camp to come in and be part of that very early on. So that's certainly a luxury or a great thing, actually, about working on the Star Wars films, is that particular thing.
James, did you have something similar when you guys were doing like conceptual art and that kind of stuff early on?
Yeah, I mean, it was a unique opportunity in that we had Lucasfilm, our kind of production entity, right next to us. It's like we're all kind of this tight little family. So it wasn't like we had a client down in LA. We were all in kind of under one roof in a sense. And so we started a small art department, the 7 of us, just tucked away in a corner with a sign saying "Do not enter" with like Darth Vader cut out on it or something. Very ominous.
Very effective.
Yeah, and effective. Yeah. We had people in there all the time. It was a lot of just it was a lot of talking initially. It was a lot of just getting in a room with some people like Dennis Muren and Roger Guyette and John Knoll and these kind of big guys that have been around it. And Dennis Muren was there from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So to hear his perspective on what it meant to be Star Wars from his point of view, it was amazing just to be in the room with them. And again, a lot of it was just dialogue and a lot of just talking. And the 7 artists would kind of sit there and scribble some ideas and kind of go back to our workstations. But it was an amazing opportunity to be in this kind of room with these guys, just throwing ideas around.
Right.
I think this is the guy that you were talking about with the
bushy-haired guy with the plaid shirt.
So this is, illustrating that fact that we're bringing together, the imagination of George Lucas and the art department, Ralph McQuarrie, Joe Johnston, and all those guys that sort of helped conceive of what the world visually looked like. And it was kind of a perfect marriage of those two things, and I think that's what really made Star Wars what it is. And then this next clip is the one that shows you a little bit about the history and how interlinked those ILM and Star Wars are kind of together. So we'll go ahead and let that play.
That's pretty good legacy.
No pressure.
Yeah. So with that in mind, the way that episode 7 started for us, I don't know if everybody remembers this, but this was a tweet from the Bad Robot feed that this Force for Change that JJ was a big supporter of, the charity event that we did earlier in the year. This came to us, and JJ had said, hey, let's do a thing where I'm going to write a note, and we'll have the note inside of Luke's hand, and we'll put it against this backdrop. We'll find something that we shot. I think at this time they were out shooting on Skellig Michael Island.
They were, yeah.
And so this was sort of the beginning of that sort of mystery that JJ wanted to introduce to everybody. It's like, you knew he wasn't going to tell you a lot about episode 7, but he was going to drop these little clues. And he's like, let's use this for the background, and you'll just put Luke's hand on there. And I'm thinking, there is no Luke's hand. We don't have a Luke's hand. And so then we had to go and research, like, what could you see of Luke's hand in
End of Empire.
Yeah, in Empire, when he's in the X-Wing, you get to see a little bit of his wrist, and that's pretty much all you see.
Yeah.
And so we had to then, James, we got together and we said, okay, well, we know also kind of what Anakin's mechanical hand looked like, and we sort of extrapolated those two things and sort of built this thing that we thought looked a little more mechanical, a little more weathered, a little more beaten.
We had geometry, Dave Folger found some geometry from 3, I think, where we had Anakin's mechanical hand, but we knew it couldn't be that. It had to be something
different.
else.
Yeah. And so it was really fun, to be involved early on in coming up with these things that no one had ever seen before, and being able to dig back into the archives of the Star Wars movies and extrapolate that out into a new idea and then put that out for everybody to see. So it was one weekend's worth of fun, that we had early on. And then, this was just long before we did anything real on the movie, but it was cool.
Yeah, this is cool. I didn't know we'd learned the secrets of the tweets of Star Wars. Which
that's right. Yeah, all sorts of clues out there.
We're talking about the VFX pipeline, right? Like, you guys have a very, over the years, you develop a very, very specific way in which you guys work.
Yeah, we, and it's not really different than the way other visual effects facilities work, but, and I hate to bore people with it because I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, but, basically sometimes you have images that come in and then we always get images out. That's a guaranteed. We're always putting images out. And you have all of these different departments that you see up there on the screen, and sometimes they're all involved in a shot, sometimes only some of them are involved, depending on the complexity of the shot. But I think, one thing you can always count on is that there's been some amount of art and design put into it, kind of either in the assets that you're using in the shot or in the concept of the shot itself. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we're doing very simple things, and sometimes we're doing very complex things. But it's all part of serving the story, trying to tell the story that the director's after, and trying to get an image out that works for him. So
right.
And so I think this next section we're going to start talking about the graveyard a little bit and dig a little bit deeper into that. And I think Matthew's brought some a clip here of the Falcon chase.
I thought that I would just read a little note here. Yeah, and I have a section here of the Falcon chase, basically, and it covers a lot of items and sound as well as visual. So it is the longest clip we're going to play. It's about 5 minutes. So, but it's Star Wars, so I hope you guys like it.
Get away with it.
Here we go.
Now available on Blu-ray and DVD.
Yeah.
So Matthew, that sequence, there were so many things to talk about in that sequence, but the TIE fighter scream, the Falcon whine, these are sounds that are like embedded in our cultural consciousness. For you tackling this sequence, what were the challenges in kind of recreating those sounds, and what other things were present in the sequence?
Well, it's funny, like as you say, like a lot of those, there's so many iconic sounds that Ben Burt had created at Skywalker Sound that we didn't want to change. We wanted to make sure we had the best high quality versions of those, so I went back to a lot of his original recordings that he had done and made sure I used the current A to D conversion technology today to get a really high quality signal to have. But things like, it's funny, the TIE fighter sound of it coming in when she hears it and we wanted that to really play. That's the TIE fighter. We actually didn't have a sound of the TIE fighter that was that long in our archives because a lot of pass-bys. There's a slightly long one in New Hope as they go by into the Death Star. So we went back to some of the original elements, which is this elephant sound, and then it's cars driving over like wet pavement mixed with that. And so we actually conceived another one that say it would be in the same zone like that. So we don't want to change those things because sound has such an easy sort of emotional and subliminal way to put you back in a universe again, and it's not on screen. So we have this like kind of back door into your mind to ground you back into the universe again, and that was one of the things that we really wanted to do, to have people feel like we're going to be part of Star Wars again. And there's stuff we'll talk about in a little bit about how we changed some things, but like even the weapon on the Falcon, we hadn't really heard it shoot in an environment where there's air. So we took some of the base, which was the base elements of that, which is a 50 caliber weapon fire. We mixed that with some classic sort of Star Wars laser to make that new shot that you hear. But even the little things in those scenes, like the sound of his chair moving in there, we wanted to make sure that was original. So we found out the kind of motor that was used in the original, and we got that motor again and re-recorded it to get the sound so it would be exactly the same. So we just really wanted to ground it, because we're all huge Star Wars fans that work on the film, so to get a chance to put something in there that pays respect to that is, and JJ, I mean, that stemmed all the way from JJ Abrams all the way to us. I mean, we're all fans of some form, and JJ was the director, and he really made that mantra for us.
Yeah, it's such an interesting idea of basically creating something that only works if it feels familiar, but you also have to go and move the ball forward and everything.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, that graveyard sequence in particular. There were so many familiar elements in there. The Down Star Destroyer and that kind of thing. James and you guys were doing the conceptual work for that. What were the creative directives that you guys were working with?
This was fairly early in the process where we had this idea of a battle that once had happened, and what is that? Is that what kind of playground can we use that to our advantage? And I think it even might have been a JJ idea of this once past battle, all these ships wrecked, and I think initially it was more of Rey and her speeder kind of traveling through some of those moments, and as it progressed, it became a bigger and bigger moment in the movie, and that's kind of just that little piece shows how involved everybody is from the whole process, and that it could start as a small idea, and the more people that are brought into it, the more we kind of contribute to it. And filmmaking is a collaboration, if anything. And as more people got involved, this idea evolved with it into this big sequence that we saw.
Right. Were there ever any things where you guys said we have too many things? We have an AT-AT and an ATST. Was there too much stuff, or how do you figure that out? Because it has to read even while things are happening really quickly.
I think one thing, it took us a while, the artists, to understand that one thing that is so Star Wars is its simplicity, that it's a very simple silhouette. I don't know if this came from Ralph McQuarrie or if it came from George's mind directly, but if you just look at the Falcon, it's a very simple shape, and you can understand that shape against a TIE fighter shape and against a Star Destroyer shape. So I think we eventually thought that the biggest kind of element in there should be a Star Destroyer. Yeah. And then everything else can kind of play off of that, where initially we had rebel fleets and we had all these different ships, and it became kind of a bigger thing, but it didn't have that Star Wars memorable effect. So it went back to that one shot. I think it's one of the first shots in the first trailer, which is seeing her speeder kind of go across camera, and it became just a big triangular pyramid, and that's all you need.
Yeah, and I think that was really effective, because it was one of those things that you could watch people as they were watching that shot, and you could see their faces change, as you went from, oh, it's a speeder in a desert, to, oh my God, it's a Star Destroyer. And it was a really fun moment to see them, witnessing that and seeing the reaction to such an iconic ship that they know, and all the questions that come flooding from seeing it.
It's a testament to the design of that ship, of being such a simple ship, and what Matthew was saying about the sound. There's such iconic, simple sounds that we don't even have to see a TIE fighter to know that it's a TIE fighter.
One of the things that was really difficult was actually coming up with even just pieces of junk that were going to be in the graveyard. It sounds easy, and you say, oh, well, we'll just throw some random Star Wars stuff in there, but it is really hard to figure out what random Star Wars stuff is. Because there are very few ships that actually have the size and the scale to be seen, for one, and to stand up against those Star Destroyers, or else they just get lost,
Right.
And then to come up with these pieces and to try to figure out, engines were great because you could break them off and you could have them sticking part out, and people could kind of understand what that was. And the top of the Star Destroyer was really iconic, and that was a great thing to be pulling out all the time and having it sticking out from different angles in the sand. But once it became sort of amorphous shapes, it started to lose something. So we had to try to find those angles and those pieces that really felt good, and really study what the old ships look like in order to pull out those kind of iconic shapes. I think this piece was one that Yannick Dussault, one of our art directors on the film, did. That was an early concept of what the Falcon going into the Super Star Destroyer was. At first, it wasn't even a Super Star Destroyer. It was just a regular Star Destroyer, and we had much more stuff around it, and then it sort of evolved into what the shot was. But and this is another great one he did, just showing the scale of things. Kind of, this was, I think, for when Rey comes out, maybe conceptually what she might be seeing.
We had an idea where early on where they had these tugboats that would drag big derelict pieces from space onto the planet and just kind of ram them into the planet. And I think this one kind of reflects that, where they were just in these massive craters. So again, it's just showing the creative process of throwing out all these crazy ideas and seeing what sticks.
That was actually one thing too though, about this new movie with JJ, is that the fact that we could watch all your CineSync sessions that you guys had with all your visual effects departments around the world, and we would all call in and be looking at the latest shots, and sound was invited to be part of that. So it would also give us inspiration to see even work in progress. Yeah. We could watch. We were at the Skywalker Ranch. You guys are in the Presidio, but we were all synchronized with our films to be able to listen to JJ give his direction from Santa Monica over CineSync, and watch all that and get inspiration from it and be part of the process really early on.
Yeah, that was cool. I have a little bit of before and after stuff that I'll just let play, but basically this details the, kind of shows what we had to work with when it comes to Rey looking around the ship. And I think the big thing about this sequence was that we were trying to show in very few shots a little bit about Rey's character. I think JJ was very into the fact that, we wanted to see her inside the Star Destroyer. We didn't want the audience to necessarily know right away that it was a Star Destroyer. We wanted them to kind of come to that realization, and that's why you can see in here that there's some clues, just in terms of the sort of shapes that you see and the pill lights on the wall. And I think, fans would kind of recognize the top of the hangar there that she's in when she jumps down. I'm sorry, this is actually not in movie order exactly, but, and then, seeing that is almost exactly what some of the concept art was, this gigantic thing perched on top of the sand dune, and then seeing her slide down is a little bit of fun, I think thrown in there, because there's the sense that she's kind of a daredevil, she's capable at what she's doing, that she is, a kid. She's sliding down a hill, basically, So there's a lot you get out of those very few shots, and kind of an insight into her character, I think, at the beginning of the movie, which is really cool. This is an exterior chase shot that just shows a little bit about the amount of CG work that went into building the desert. And I think, the environment was not only challenging because of all of these pieces we had to put in, but just creating the desert itself, which is so complicated and has all of these different looks. That was really helped by actually going on location in Abu Dhabi, shooting, seeing the desert, how it actually looked in all those different, lighting conditions, and being able to recreate that in our work was really helpful.
You told me something earlier about a little Easter egg in that moment.
Secret about the shot. Yeah, there's actually, it's difficult to see in this breakdown, but right at the moment where this wipe happens, you can see there's the pilot ejects. So he's safe, he's fine. That guy totally lived. But we just thought it would be fun, to have him. Ejecting in space does you very little good, but on the planet we thought we'd have him escape.
It's just a G.I. Joe thing. It's good. Yeah.
This shows you a little bit of a breakdown of all the 3D geometry that went into, a lot of these things that we call environments are just such a mix these days of both full CG geometry and matte painting, the old techniques of matte painting that that we've done for a long time, but now of course we do it all digitally, and we have the opportunity to put all this 3D geometry in there, and some things we build out to a huge extent, as you can see from the Star Destroyer. And again, that was really fun to try to come up with exactly what the Star Destroyer was going to be. What did it look like on the inside? We had never really seen the inside of a Star Destroyer, or the actual inside guts of a Star Destroyer before. So figuring out what those shapes were, what would you see if you were inside of it? And we quickly figured out that a regular Star Destroyer is not nearly big enough to fly through for a minute or whatever this chase takes place. But the Super Star Destroyer is about 3 times at least that size. So it was provided plenty of opportunity for flying through all these little passageways. And as far as design goes, we really riffed off of kind of what you see in the Death Star. If you think about that Death Star chase in Return of the Jedi, where they're going through, they really love those little slots that you can just barely fit a Millennium Falcon through. Perfect for flying through. So we put a lot of those in. And they don't have very many new ideas, the Empire.
Right. Speaking of that chase, the radar dish.
Yes.
Where did the idea for the new radar dish come from?
Well, maybe you can talk about that a little bit. I think Darren Guilford, the production designer, was involved in that.
Yeah, I think it started with a conversation of what does the Millennium Falcon look like 30 years after Return of the Jedi, and we threw a lot of ideas around of that it deliberately looks just awful. So when Han Solo sees it for the first time, he's like, "What have you done with my ship?" And in the same way that I think Lando Calrissian at one point said, like, "What did you do with my ship?" kind of thing. So deliberately making it a little bit uglier, and this illustration kind of portrays that a bit of adding some junk on top of it. And it eventually got whittled down to, well, we never see it post missing its radar dish from Return of the Jedi. It's flying through one of those, as Pat said, convenient little slots, loses its radar dish, but what does that radar dish look like? And I think someone at one point said, well, why don't we just have it look like exactly like the Blockade Runner radar dish? So the first ship you see in A New Hope that flies into camera has a radar dish that's a rectangular looking thing. And doing what we do best for Star Wars, we just rip off what's already been done before. and we just took that and literally just slapped that one.
I've talked to you about the honesty before.
I know.
It's an homage. It's a respectful homage.
But in terms of like recreating the ship, digitally, right? There's like models existed originally. Where did you guys go back to for the to figure out how like the new digital Falcon is going to look like?
The archives, really. I mean, that was the big thing was, and actually I have a slide of it here. This was the Empire Strikes Back Falcon model, which is gorgeous, and it's so well built. It makes you just want to photograph it and just use it as is, and that's kind of what we did. With the exception of the fact that it was all turned into real CG. We had versions of it that were sort of projected photographed, but those don't hold up as well as actually being able to render it and light it properly. So we basically took these photographs and we used them, to the nth degree. We were putting every little decal, and there are a lot of really funny little decals all over the ship that people put on and as they were building it, and little details that really only our painters even know where they all are, but they put every single nut and bolt exactly where it should be. And it took probably about a year of development to make the Falcon again, which seems crazy because it's that thing you go, well, you have that. Well, at least you're starting from something you have. And it's like, you don't really, and you want to build it properly and you want to have it be able to last. So we really took the time we spent that year building the Falcon and, down
Isn't there a little scale Star Wars poster inside one of those models?
I believe there is. Yeah, there's absolutely everything. I found
So did you include that,
an
Pat,
army
or?
man in one of the in the Super Star Destroyer hanging out down in the middle of the thing. In all the gack that you'd never see him, but he's just sort of hanging out in there. It's really cool. But the Falcon was, that thing that you kind of craft with love because it is a character in the film, and as we introduce it in this moment, I think this is a huge moment in the film, and I think JJ knew that from the very, very beginning.
We spent a lot of time trying to figure out what that was going to be.
Yeah, and there was conversations about, how covered up should it be, and, it all just came down to sort of his instinct about what's the best way to introduce it. But I think that's a very funny way to kind of get into it and to see it for the first time. And it's almost like you're exhaling, you're letting out that, like, okay, I finally saw the Falcon, and
Right.
You're getting that moment out, but at the same time, he gives you time to sort of enjoy it.
It was funny, sound-wise at that moment, we had John Williams on our mixed stage. He came for all of our final mix playbacks, which was fantastic having him in there. But that exhale moment, we were trying to time that perfectly when the Star Wars theme is supposed to kick in. We probably went over that, and we're just modifying it by frames and frames and frames until we felt like everyone's acknowledgement that you're seeing it is also. We didn't want to tip the hat, but we wanted you to have it, dovetail into what you were thinking with the music and this emotional moment. But yeah, we certainly spent a lot of time just on that, just in the audio to get that part right.
Just talking a little bit about the technical aspects of building the Falcon, we, knowing that we were building assets that we wanted to live for a long time and travel through multiple movies and be able to use in multiple ways, we started looking at our material library, just the way that our basic shaders at ILM, and we sort of, with the Falcon in mind, kind of modernized everything with a new shader where we took a lot of new photographic reference, and then we painstakingly matched all that photographic reference in CG. And that's something that, every shop has their version of that. They have their sort of main shader that they render with. And we just wanted to take it a little bit further and take it out of the realm of, knowing what we know about lighting now. ILM has this long history of artists being in control of everything, which is great. But at the same time, you just need these ground truths where you're able to render predictably. So we spent a lot of time actually just making the CG, the ground truth CG of the Falcon and all the other Star Wars assets in this unified asset system a little bit more robust, so that when we were doing things like painting the Falcon for the first time, we were able to use Mari Lookdev and go through and paint the Falcon in layers where you could paint on this. I don't know if you've all noticed, but Star Wars has this history of not being the cleanest universe in the world, and all the ships have this layers of gack all over them. And so being able to paint in layers of dirt like that and have control over all those layers and not have it be sort of a mystery from shot to shot what you're going to get, and the same thing with BB-8, being able to make him look absolutely perfect in comparison to the model was really important. So that was sort of like we sort of revitalized how we built assets on the show, and that's going to carry forward into a lot of other ILM shows and Star Wars shows for sure going forward.
Is that confirmation that the Falcon is in Episode 8?
Anyway, this is what the Falcon gimbal looked like. So for all those cockpit shots where you're looking at Rey, this is what we shot those in. And I think one big thing to note is that it's outside. And I think a lot of the things that gave those cockpit shots authenticity is the ability to see natural light moving around in the cabin, and it gives it a very organic feeling, and it doesn't make it feel like a staged sort of CG thing, which is great. And it's really how it would have been done back in the day, and that's the big thing, is the more you could do things like they were done during 4, 5, and 6, the more authenticity you brought to this. And I've had so many people tell me, it really felt like I was watching a sequel to those movies, and that really felt good. Just to hear them say that they felt like they could have stopped watching Episode 6, or a lot of cases they did. They did marathons at home. They watched Episode 6, and they went out to see Episode 7, and they said you just felt like it was the same universe, and everything was a continuation, which was great.
Yeah. Cool. One other, talking about Jakku sequences, there's a moment where Finn comes across the crashed TIE fighter.
Oh, yeah.
That was like a really, really fun sound sequence, Matthew. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit. There's some really weird, crazy somethings happening there. I jumped again at the explosion. So.
Yeah.
Gets me every time.
Yeah, that sequence was no John Williams music in there, so we have to obviously, we've got him in the room, so we want to make sure the soundtrack's going to be properly. We're going to up our game for him, but yeah, it's that thing where there's practical effects on set. There was that giant TIE fighter that was there. The explosion was a practical effect, so it's enhancing what's on screen, and we had that absence of sound moment to give everyone a scare. JJ really wanted that to be a big moment for the audience.
Well, I think that's one of those things too. You have no idea what that sounds like.
Right.
You really don't know what it sounds like or looks like. I mean, coming up with visually how it looks like for this thing to be working its way into the sand, and you're not really sure why.
Right.
That was that was a challenging sequence for us as well. And I thought it was cool not to have the music because it really added to the mystery of the thing.
Yeah, mystery and the reality of his isolation too. That was one thing in New Hope when R2 and 3PO are first on Tatooine. It gets really quiet, and there's sections that have no music when R2's in the canyon and he's hearing the Jawas kind of like scurrying around. That was really effective because it really brought you in there with them. So that's kind of what we wanted to go for here. Just also paying respect or ripping off the past. It works. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of that in the film.
Yeah, what is the sounds what are the sounds that make up that sound when it's kind of like getting sucked into the sand?
Getting sucked into the sand, that's, there's dog food in a can being pulled out. There's a long, low frequency burp happening, like it's being eaten. Basically, we wanted we kind of treated it like it was being digested, so we put some digestive sounds in there. And then we have that nice rolling sort of thunder effect that happens. We wanted to have it as it blows up. As he's standing there, you kind of hear the sonic boom of the explosion rolling off into the surrounds and just kind of giving it that realism.
How many burps are in the movie in general?
Burps in this movie? Yeah, there's probably, I'd say on average we put 1 to 3 burps in every film. So there's a gentleman by the name of Howie it's in our library great burps from him. And we get him at 192 kilohertz so we can take him way down and still get that diaphragm flutter.
So when it comes to Star Wars, another vital thing that people are aware of are are droids and the way droids sound. Obviously, there's a very, very cute droid in this movie. But I understand that you have a history with droid sounds and voices personally already.
I've played some voices for droids in various permutations of Star Wars. I played a...
Do one.
Do one! No, I played a guy that, he was the bad guy in Revenge of the Sith as General Grievous. He was the leader of the droid army.
Just a bad guy, General Grievous, that's all.
And then all of his dorky little compatriots, the battle droids, all those little guys that are like, look out, Roger, Roger, all those guys. That was
Wow, that really was you!
Yeah, that was me. And then Grievous would say stuff like, what's the situation, Captain? That kind of stuff. It was fun. It was really fun.
I'm going to have you record my voicemail.
You got it.
Cool.
Okay,
good. But let's talk about BB-8, because
Yes.
BB-8 is adorable amongst so many different ways, including the way BB-8 talks and sounds. So
Yeah, I have a little clip I can show real quick of it's Rey meeting BB-8 for the first time. Yeah, BB-8 was one of those moments. Was one of the first things JJ had us work on, and to the point where he wanted to have a real hands-on approach with it. So literally, we had an iOS device that basically he could control timbre and pitch of oscillators, and we set up sort of parameters that I thought he would like. And so at one point, this was going to be used on the set for him to actually have BB-8 respond to the actors, because there'd be a lot of communication with BB-8 and the other actors, more so than R2-D2 in the previous films. So this was originally conceived for that, and then I think that was his early ambition, was to be able to do that, but then we ended up just having the puppeteers say boop, 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 because it was just too much. I think JJ's a genius, but I think that was
He
probably...
needed to watch.
Yeah,
what
he
was
needs to
going
probably
on,
see what's happening in the shots as they're happening. So we kind of elaborated on that a little bit, and then it went into, he would perform the sort of tones that would happen, and then we hired Ben Schwartz, this comedian friend of JJ's, to come in and actually say work out with JJ what the lines would be that BB-8 would be saying, and we cut those in editorially in the Avid for timing purposes. And then we then took those oscillated tones at one point to give it more realism. We fed them through a talk box, kind of like that Peter Frampton, song, and fed it into a comedian. Oh my gosh, why am I getting his name? Yes, Bill Hader. I spent about a day with Bill Hader, with JJ, feeding the tones into Bill Hader's embouchure, and he was moving his mouth around, not saying anything, just playing the tones through his mouth. And we re-recorded that, and then cut that a little bit more, and that's sort of what has become the voice of BB-8.
do pictures of these recording sessions exist?
Yes, I think we took some selfies, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, it was just like in a little editing room. We just kind of were playing around for about a day with Bill being hilarious.
It's so evocative though, but it also goes hand in hand with the design. I mean, James, what was the design process for BB-8 like?
He was something that JJ wanted fairly early on. He wanted, what is the new R2D2? And we did a lot of research and kind of figuring out, well, does he float? Does he have multiple legs? And then one day we got this Post-it. I'm like, well, what is this? And it's, and we were like, there was very little, there's very little dialogue or anything behind it. It was just like, here, just take a look at this. And we all were looking at it and we're like, wow, this is like a rolling droid. How perfectly Star Wars can this be? And then just from the simplest sketch, we evolved it from, this little snowman looking thing to this like really kind of cute, lovable character. And BB-8 fits right in the Star Wars world in that, we have all this drama happening, and then we get to cut away to a little comedy, a little something for the kids.
Right.
And then you can see in these drawings how it developed. And again, it's part of the process, and it happens in visual effects too, where we go as far as we possibly can take it, and then we look at it and assess it, and eventually kind of comes back around to the simplest, first point that we kind of took at it. And so our instinct was, or JJ's instinct was right, in that it's just that very simple silhouette kind of won out in the end.
Yeah, we even had moments where we were trying to figure out things like how does BB-8 get down the stairs? How does he get up the stairs? And we tried a few different things in animation where we took some of the little circles on his body and we protruded little things out, but he kept getting scary. He kept looking like some sort of like treacherous sea urchin or something very creepy. So every time we tried that, we went back to simple. And it really works for a droid, I think, and it is because of the legacy of everything that's been established, where you get, the simplest thing in Star Wars is often the best, and it keeps him cute, and it makes him friendly, and I think that's what he really needed to be.
At one point, he said, when we were working on what the sound of BB-8 was going to be, he said, well, let's make him sound like what he looks like. And I was like, well, he said, the name BB-8, the B's and 8s actually look like him. So why don't we have him, the word like a symbol of a B and an 8 look like the BB-8, And so so at one point it was going to be all B's and 8th notes. But we tried that. We actually tried that at one point, but then I think getting his hands on and performing it and it was more satisfactory to JJ at that point.
Right. That's a perfect design note of seeing R2D2 with BB-8 and how they really do fit in the same world.
Yeah.
But some of the earlier design, again, we had all this tread work on it, so how could he move up a hill and really go across some ground. But it always came back to these very simple one color, two color shifting tones. And it's a perfect example of how they fit in that same world.
Yeah, we were challenged too by that scene. We knew that scene was coming as well. So the fact that Ben Burtt, who had created the R2-D2 sounds, which kind of broke the mold. I mean, everything that was in that R2-D2's expression was so iconic, and every time we tried to go in a direction, it would sound too much like R2-D2. So the fact that we had to have them have a conversation at that point, and they seemed distinct to us, I was like, okay, finally, I think we got it. That there's like that Venn diagram that's kind of R2 and BB-8, kind of similar there.
Yeah. There were a lot of different versions of BB-8, on set, from the one that was pushed with the long arms, to one with short arms, to one that had a mechanical drive on the left, and one that had a mechanical drive on the right. And everyone on set would sort of get together when we started a shot and sort of say, okay, which version of BB-8 is this one going to be? Depending on where he was facing towards camera, we'd pick the best one. And there was the wiggler, who was just the guy that sat there and just wiggled his body. Mm-hmm. And they all had a slightly different capability. Well, if we put the wiggler in, he can do it a little faster, his head's a little quicker, so we had different parameters for which one you would use when. And then, of course, we added a bunch of the extra stuff in CG afterwards in terms of the hand and the ropes. And here's a little demo of all the stuff that he's got in his body. This doesn't actually appear in the movie this way. This is him showing off.
That's like the video game that's coming in.
Yeah, sure. But we did have to build a perfect, CG replica of BB-8 so that we could have him perform in some scenes that he wasn't in or that he couldn't have been in for various reasons. And it was a real challenge. This is actually a CG BB-8, which I don't think very many people realize the very first time you see him. The fact that we had a real character, though, to reference, it was huge. And it means everything in terms of being able to bring authenticity to something, is to be able to look at something on set and go, that's exactly what that looks like. And to recreate that, that takes a lot of the guesswork out of when you're trying to create CG objects and make them look real if you have him as a real character. And not to mention the fact that everyone just believing he's real is a huge thing, too. You know, I'm not saying it doesn't look great. And to be honest, I can't tell the difference. We have, you can play a drinking game that only we know the answers to, where you try to figure out what's CG and what's. But it's one of those things where the fact that he is a real character and that people interact with him in the film, it means a lot in terms of bringing him to life. You know.
Well, all the strategy too, you had like hybrid would be like a digital head and then like the physical body and.
There's a bunch of that going on, depending on, maybe he needed to react to someone's line, so his head needed to turn one way. And you don't realize that until you're in the edit and you're cutting shots together, and then you find out that, it's just like with actors, you just don't have quite the right shot, and we have the ability to manipulate that. So.
Well, that's interesting how it becomes such a big storytelling tool. It's like there's that one moment where, you can tell the story better, where there's a shot of Kylo Ren where he has his mask off, that then got moved around.
Yeah.
And in the movie he has his mask on.
Yeah, there was a point at which he's talking to Snoke where he in the film as shot had his mask off and was holding his helmet under his arm, and then was decided later on that we didn't want to reveal his face to the audience or to Rey too early in the film, and because of the way the scenes got shifted around, we needed to put his mask on. So our team in London put the mask on, and I don't think anyone really even realizes that. There are some very funny takes of him, though, where he has his mask on and is holding the helmet. It's really strange. So we did have to get rid of that.
Right. So this is Star Wars, so I would be remiss if I did not bring up the topic of lightsabers.
Yes.
There's a new lightsaber in the movie, and there are new lightsaber sounds. Matthew, would you like to talk about lightsaber sounds and?
Yeah, I mean, once again, another iconic sound that everyone's very familiar with, and so we wanted Kylo's saber to have a quality to it that was broken. I wonder if I can play. Let's see if I have one little quick clip here. Where is it? It's Castle Kylo Ray. There we go. This one. There we go. So yeah, that scene. I mean, that saber we wanted to have. It's unfinished. And one of the cool things about working on the film is that we got to go out to the set, and I got to hold the saber in my hand and look at it and see how it was designed. And it was we wanted it to be an unfinished design. It was not done the way a normal Jedi saber was made, and so it's like it could blow up in your hand, basically, is what JJ wanted it to be like. And so we put a lot of electrical sort of malfunctioning in there. We also put a low frequency tone in it, which is different than any other saber we've done. That's like it really dark side and really, really dangerous. And actually there's things like there's a slowed down explosion in there. There's also the purring of our sound designer's cat, Pork Chop. I'd be remiss to not give a shout out to Pork Chop, but is in there as part of the low tone when it's just idling. But that's all those little elements come together to make this thing that's just dangerous, basically.
Yeah, I think all of that same stuff translated into the visual aspect of it too. And I remember working early on just trying to come up with, how do you make this unstable thing look different? And we went through many variations, and a lot of them looked too much like a flaming sword, and he was just very adamant, this isn't a flaming sword, it shouldn't look like a flaming sword, but it's got to have a bit of that flaminess to it to make it look a little more dangerous. We knew we wanted sparks coming out, but of course our first iterations of it where it looked like something out of some sort of a fireworks show.
Yeah.
So we had to tone that back until we found just the right amount. And that electrical thing you were talking about, we do have these little strings, we call them the strings that pop out every once in a while that kind of break off of the main part of the blade, which was, it was sort of a difficult thing to get the balance of all of that right. And so we did a lot of different balancing of the strings versus the sparks versus the flaminess of the ends of it.
Yeah.
All that played into what is the personality of this sword. Everybody had the a blue lightsaber obviously reflected one thing as opposed to a red, but really we were trying to define a little bit of what the personality of Kylo was through his weapon.
Yeah. Did it go through like a lot of the hilt? Did it go through different iterations in the design process?
Yeah, there was some really early stuff, and I think once the hilt idea came out, it was like, oh, that's done. We got our design.
Well, it's a bold choice, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing about it, is that it really is something that everyone had a reaction to. Not everyone, their first reaction was this is different,
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people did come around to the fact that it is a bold choice to have such a different weapon. Once they kind of got to know the character, I think it made a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. And what about what was the way you guys did that, the effects for the lightsabers?
Well, this time it was a bit different. Before we used a technique that we called wooden sticks, where we would bash wood sticks together, and then we would roto those sticks, and then we put glows on them. And this time we took it up a notch, where we were actually, and this has a lot to do with just being, 30 years later, and with technology, being able to go somewhere and take these LED tubes and have them be strong enough that you could pick them up and still swing them, and they weren't too heavy. You could bash them against each other and they weren't going to shatter, and that you could have these effects, these great effects, like they could turn the intensity of the light up and down, and when they hit, they actually did flash. And you can see when, like for instance, when Finn and Kylo are up against the tree and he's pressing them against the tree, and a lot of those flashes in that cool interactive light came from the sabers. Using them as a lighting element was something that we had done some of that on like episode 3, but not a lot, because you weren't always sure if that was going to be in the right spot or if it was the right intensity. But when you had the actual saber emitting it, it really it added something to a lot of the scenes. Like this one, for instance, I'm sure it actually added to Rey's performance, because she really felt like there was this glowing hot thing next to her face. So she was able to sort of channel that into the acting, which is great. And having those things clashing like that makes those actors really feel like they're really in battle, which is great.
Yeah.
We had an early art discussion on whether, if you notice in the original movies, there's no interactive lighting at all, because they, as you said, they just kind of replace these reflective swords, these wooden swords. So I don't know if they did it in the prequels, but it was a discussion we had where it's like, are we going to see light really bouncing against the actors, and how is that going to play differently than these original movies, which you never really saw? That was it a magic light, or was it something they just simply?
But I think once you saw it, it looked so good. That
It did.
there
I
was
think
no
once
going
you
back.
see it, it was like, all right, yeah, we're done.
Yeah, there's like the moment between Kylo Ren and Rey where she has the Force theme comes up, and that kind of sells the entire idea. You know what I mean? Like that red and that blue on each of their faces kind of makes that moment.
Yeah, and then we did do 3D. We did use 3D particle technology to actually render the swords this time, which allowed us to do a lot when they clash. In terms of the sparks coming off and different things happening when they hit objects. We were able to actually augment that in CG after the fact, which was a huge boost for us. That's something that we weren't able to do in the prequels.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I could literally talk to you about this movie for another 40 hours, but the hour groweth late. So I just want to thank everybody for for talking today. I'm at Tubac, Matthew Wood, Chris Lawrence. And thank you for coming out to watching the panel.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
All right.
You can line up at the mics. Take a few questions.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
I have a question for Matt. It must have been so amazing to source Ben Burtt's original recordings and actually get the idea of what the source material for all these elements were.
Yes.
Was it ever a problem to go with your new supplemental material, like a little bit too far afield from the original classic Star Wars feel?
No, not really. I mean, Ben has been my mentor. I started working out there 26 years ago, and I worked with him on the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, and then we did the prequels together. And so the first time I had to sort of take it without him was on the Clone Wars series. I did about 120 episodes of that, and we had big scenes with Boba Fett's ship, Slave One, and so we had to go more than what was done in the features, and so we just would go back. I know what he uses as original source was a P-51 Mustang sound, and so I'd take that engine and tweak it and try to keep it in the same universe. That's kind of what the ancillary, working on the ancillary shows is like, is you try to go back to the base and then expand to keep it in that same universe. And luckily Ben is still with us at Skywalker for consultation. So, and it's fun. I'm sure he gets a kick out of seeing other people take ideas and run with it, just like JJ's done with Star Wars. We try to push it forward but pay respect.
Cool. And just personally, it was amazing to see a new awesome Star Wars movie and be able to see and hear all this amazing work put into it. So thank you.
We feel the same way. Thanks.
Hey guys.
Hey.
I just want to say on behalf of probably everybody in here, like, you guys crushed it. That was so cool.
Thank you.
Big team.
Really
Yeah.
great. So this is, as far as the visuals go, both supervisors here. Let's say an instance like the Millennium Falcon, or even the Graveyard, with the massive amount of modeling that was done in there. What typically, you said you have a global staff, but as far as what you guys supervise, how big are your teams on something like that?
Well, I'd say in ILM San Francisco, we had probably about 150 people on the project. In London, maybe there's 75, and in Singapore, maybe 75 or 50 to 75 people. It's interesting you bring up that scene. Those are kind of an example of almost a one-off sort of shot where we know we're not going to do a lot of them. You have a few of them in a row. And so what you tend to do is you find an artist who you think could be great at that. And in this case, we typically call in our environment artists because they have a lot of experience building CG quickly. And they really love the challenge of those moments, right? Where you say, okay, this has to be insanely complicated, and you're going to have to fly through this, mile worth of stuff, and we want light shafts coming in from one side, and we want it to look dusty and dirty, and go. And then, he'll come back with this amazing stuff, and that's where the artistry really comes in. Is you're allowing people to come up with some ideas that, based off some concept art and things, they're allowed to take it and run with it, and that really inspires them, and they come back with some of their best work. And then you talk about that, and of course you iterate 75 to 100 more times. But you have this great process that's what really gets us all jazzed. That's what really is fun about this work that we do, is being able to sit with a great artist like that. And Quentin Marmier was the name of the guy that actually did that, and he is just unbelievable. So it's great.
Definitely great work.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Hello, how you guys doing?
Good.
Feeling good.
First off, thank you for being here, by the way.
Thank you.
This was awesome. My question was more around the negative feedback. How do you guys handle and incorporate negative feedback? Like a lot of folks, yeah.
As an acoustical phenomenon?
Oh, no.
It's a phase. It's a phase thing. You just got to flip it.
Good. Well, like a lot of folks with.
I wish it was that easy for us.
Like what, from like,
a lot of folks
people seeing the film, or like a director, or what?
Or just like from the visual effects, like some folks who originally saw, the square satellite, which you guys explained very well. A lot of the hardcore fans gave some negative feedback to that. They're like, oh, they're changing something, or like the lightsabers with the different design, which I like, by the way. I love having more like a raw lightsaber, just channeled the rage, at least the feeling of that character. Yeah. But how do you guys handle that if somebody's like, oh, it's different?
I think we've done enough movies to take enough critique over the years.
Yeah.
Well, I think it comes from
handle
JJ too, that he's a very confident person, and he's just a confident filmmaker. He does care what people think, as we all do.
Sure.
But you just absolutely can't please everybody. But we all just, the one thing that we all know is we worked as hard as we possibly could.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So like when you come from that place of like really trying very hard, that if someone doesn't like what you come up with at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do about it. But I think, first of all, there's so much positive feedback that you get, which is great, because people have been really awesome about and been supportive about accepting a lot of the new things and the changes and all of that sort of stuff. But I think it does kind of come down from the top, that JJ sort of has this philosophy of, you're making a creative endeavor, you're not going to please everyone, but you try the best you can, and you do what you can.
And as I've worked on a lot of different films, as I'm sure you guys have as well, but Star Wars is the #1 film for critique on any level, and like everyone wants to talk about it, and that's what makes it amazing. And sure, there's going to be positive, there's going to be negative. It's just whatever you get.
And with that, we're going to be the hardest on ourselves.
Yeah.
So
that's for sure.
We're once it kind of goes through that, we're pretty confident that if we like something, everybody else is going to like it.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys very much. You do
Thanks.
excellent work.
Thank you.
He's just saying that.
Yeah, and he's just.
My question actually wasn't featured on the Blu-ray, and I've had this question for a while. How has the mouse taking over Lucas affected your workflow in any way, both positive and negative? And also, is the Skywalker sound library still available to the public?
To the public? Was it ever available to the public?
You spoke at, one of your employees spoke at my school, at my college, and he
I have their name.
And he said that, well, he said that the sound library was available on the internet.
Well, I'm sure a lot of things are. No, I mean, as far as the mouse question, we're making more Star Wars films. That's the number one thing that's happening. I mean, we all thought that Episode 7 was not going to happen. George, when he finished Sith, he seemed pretty content, and he was going to go on and do other things. And now he's put us under the leadership of Kathleen Kennedy, and we're making a Star Wars film every year. So the number one thing there, that's been amazing.
It's been a big creative, having Star Wars back in ILM has been a big creative revitalization of, a lot of things that were dormant for a while, which has been great. And I think that one very positive thing I can point to is, Disney has a lot of different reach around the world in terms of the research that they do, and we worked a lot on this film with Disney Research in Zurich, who helped us out with a lot of our animation facial capture systems, and among other things. And it's great to have access to those sort of like think tank research labs that there's no way we could fund that on our own. That just wouldn't happen. So having a big global company like Disney be able to provide something like that for us is great. And I think it helps them as well, because they have someone that can actually use what they're doing, which is really cool. So that's been a very positive partnership.
And the Imagineers, I've had to deal with Imagineers on a few projects that I've done that are ancillary to Star Wars in that universe. But yeah, everyone's so passionate about Star Wars. You have now the Disney Imagineers that are incredible engineers in their own right to be,
there's a lot
they're
of
a resource for us now.
WBI,
that's been, for all the theme parks things, the things that are coming down the pipe, it's going to be a huge time for Star Wars.
I really do mean it when I say it's been very positive, and not in a I welcome our overlord sort of way.
Yeah, no, me neither. We got free passes to go to Disneyland now. That's another good thing we can go. And as far as the library being available, I think you might be referring to, there's a soundboard on StarWars.com where you can kind of do a little mix of different things, but that's the extent of it's being available to the public. The rest of it is pretty much under lock and key at our facility, I hope.
I also just want to say thank you for bringing Star Wars back to its film roots. We've been wanting that for a long time. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, my name's Will. I kind of have a question for all of you. What was your favorite part working on the new Star Wars movie, or Star Wars in general? What's been your...
Let me go first. You go ahead.
Sort of coming back to it, or
well, working on a film, we have access before anybody else has access to what we get to see, which is just incredible. And I remember getting our first shots back from Bad Robot, the opening sequence with the attack on the village. Mm-hmm. And we got to sit in our little viewing station and look at this. And I remember looking around at it and going, we are the first people that are getting to see a first cut of the first 8 minutes of this movie. And everybody else, I think everybody was just in shock, and I just had to look at everybody and just go, oh my God, you guys, we should just be screaming, tearing our clothes off, because this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. So having access early on to seeing early shots and being part of the process is extraordinary.
Yeah, I think mine's not really sound related. I think it was going to Pinewood and asking if I could see the other sets just for research purposes, and going on to the Falcon set, which was a dream. I mean, it was a fully, the hallways are there, the little chessboard area, Chewie's bed, and then the ramp, and then going down the other hallway into the cockpit. It's all right there and fully constructed, and I was...
Yeah, I'd have to say exactly the same thing. My time on set happened to coincide with Harrison's return to set, and so I got to see a lot of the different sets. But being on the Millennium Falcon, it just takes your breath away. And I had the experience of I wanted to walk off set for a moment. I went down the ramp, the real
Yep,
ramp.
the real ramp.
And I walked into a face full of Chewbacca. And, as he's coming up the ramp, you really have no choice but to back up and get out of his way. But I thought in that moment, like I was just thinking, if this translates to the movie, like the feeling that I'm getting from, I feel like I'm in a Star Wars movie, if that translates to the movie, then this is going to be a huge success because it gave me this feeling inside that was, it was a crazy, overwhelming sort of rush back to when I was, a kid again. So it was awesome just to be there and to experience that.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cool. That was our last question. So once again, thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
To our amazing panelists.
Thank you.
And,
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
thanks, guys.